The New Orleans Saints have been connected to several head coaching candidates already, and it's very clear that some are much better options than others. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, the Atlanta Falcons have got to root for the New Orleans Saints in order to get into the playoffs. We'll break that whole situation down and what this game could look like for the New Orleans Saints this weekend. We're going to dive into the dream scenario candidates for the New Orleans Saints as we take a look at our power rankings for New Orleans Saints head coach. We'll power rank the dream hires that are led off, of course, with guys like Ben Johnson, Liam Coen, and others. But first, we're going to take a look at the realistic hires, the guys that the New Orleans Saints have already been connected to, some better options than others, so we'll go through our power rankings of the realistic candidates for New Orleans' open head coaching job. We appreciate you very much, as always, whether it's your first time or your next time, for making us your first listen and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's power rank some coaches. The New Orleans Saints have already been connected to 6 different head coaches, incredible reports, and I want to take a look at some that are the best options versus some that are the, let's call it, not so best options. It's not really a worst option in this situation, but some are not as good of options as others. There's no doubt about that. Let's go over the rules real quick first. I have 3 rules for this particular ranking of these 6 coaches. Number 1, only candidates that have been connected to the organization through credible reporting are included. Number 2, interest is enough. So if that credible report is that the Saints have shown interest in this coach, that's enough for us to be able to add to this list. That way we have a little bit of a longer list than just a couple of people. And number 3, speculation of the candidate's disinterest is not included or considered in this list. We're taking a look at the people that would be considered the best fits for New Orleans, not whether or not New Orleans is considered the best fit for those candidates. Although I do have my theories around why most candidates won't actually be willing to say no to the New Orleans Saints if asked for an interview, but I'll dive into that theory in another episode. Let's start at number 6, and that is going to be Colorado Buffalo head coach Deion Sanders. Now you might be saying to yourself, Ross, Deion Sanders has not been connected to the New Orleans Saints when it comes to head coaching candidates. And I will tell you that there's a word for that. And that word is wrong. Wrong. Incorrect. I'm just joking. I would never actually say that to you. But they actually have been connected to each other a little bit. Jeremy Fowler over at ESPN wrote the following. A few weeks ago, we broke down Deion Sanders' NFL outlook. I'm bumping this again because I love that. I'm bumping this again like it's a 1997 chat room. I'm bumping this again because a league source told me this about Sanders in the recent days. Quote, I think NFL teams will want to hear what he has to say, unquote. Fowler then goes on to say, so I wouldn't be shocked to see the Jets or Saints or a team casting a wide net to reach out to do its research on him. Now listen, there's a reason why I have Deion Sanders last on the list. It's not because I don't think that he's a good coach. I just think, A, he's probably not that interested in moving on from Colorado at this moment, climbing that ladder a little bit too quickly. I don't know. But the other side of it, too, is I don't know that the New Orleans Saints are in a situation where they are the appropriate type of team to be able to absorb the amount of publicity and distraction that comes with a Deion Sanders becoming your head coach. I don't think the Saints are equipped to deal with that right now in the situation that they're in. A better roster, a better team, a more successful team is probably a better fit for that conversation. So I've got Deion Sanders, number 6 on the list. At number 5 on the list, I have to put interim head coach Darren Rizzi. It just feels very much like he's no longer kind of seen as one of the top candidates. And look, I'm pro Rizzi. I think Rizzi's a great dude. I think he's going to be an awesome special teams coordinator and assistant head coach elsewhere because he's not going to stick around here in New Orleans if he doesn't get the interim job. No interim coach does, and no incoming head coach wants the former interim coach sticking around. That's not a thing. That's like breaking up with your partner, moving in your new partner, and asking your old partner to stick around to clean the house. Like, you're not doing that, right? And so that's a situation that I don't see working for New Orleans as they move forward. Darren Rizzi has done an incredible job as an interim head coach, coming in and winning more games than the previous head coach and fewer opportunities. But it just doesn't look like he's long for the head coaching position for New Orleans, so I have to put him here at number 5. At number 4, I'm putting in Mike McCarthy. A couple different reasons. I don't think he's that great of a coach. I know he won a Super Bowl and all that other stuff. I don't think he's that great of a coach. Just doesn't feel like a dude that generates a ton of buy-in. Is a guy that's got a good offensive mind and all that. And so from an on-field play perspective, maybe there's a little bit of a thing there, but I can't say Mike McCarthy is the right hire for the New Orleans Saints. And it's a retread of retreads, right? Going back to a former offensive coordinator, not a great idea. And much like Darren Rizzi, kind of continues to further the idea that you're going back to somebody that is a part of the old regime, right? A part of that old presence in some way. And if you're going to go back to a day in your past, at least go back to the Peyton days. Don't go back to the pre-Peyton days and stuff like that. So no thank you on Mike McCarthy in that situation. Unlikely that it sounds like he leaves Dallas anyway. Number 3 on this list, and this is something that happened as early as this morning or as recent as this morning, is former Las Vegas Raiders head coach Jon Gruden. Jon Gruden has been around the New Orleans Saints organization for the past season, basically past year, like calendar year, since they brought in Derek Carr as their starting quarterback. So a little bit more than a calendar year, but basically they brought in Derek Carr at the beginning of the 2023 season. They brought Jon Gruden in as a consultant to kind of help with the acclimation period for that young quarterback. He was around training camp again last year, or OTAs, whatever it was last year, and all that. So the connections are already there, right? And you think back to Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero's story from last week about how Mickey Loomis is expected to select a head coach that he knows. Well, he knows Jon Gruden, having had him around. There's a ton of different Raiders former front office members that are now a part of the New Orleans Saints on advisory roles and all these other things. So it's an interesting conundrum. And so that's why I have it at 3, is because it does feel actually very realistic, but I have my question marks about the effectiveness of that kind of hire, because you enter a situation where you're hiring a guy who effectively resigned in disgrace from his last NFL team because of an uncovering of racist, misogynistic, and homophobic language used in emails that were sent while he was working at ESPN or whatever. And or whatever is in reference to, I believe he was working at ESPN, not the emails. We know that that's the fact. It was a Wall Street Journal situation, all this other stuff. And so can you sell that guy to your locker room? Like, this is going to be pretty tough. That's going to be a little bit of a tough sell. You know what I mean? So I can't really put him up too far. But if I'm looking at it from an NFL perspective, which is you can't count on any NFL team out there to take a moral high ground over winning football games. No NFL team is going to do that. And I think you saw that with the Deshaun Watson pursuit for multiple teams, the Saints included, and all that. So hard for me to keep him off of the list, because can I see an NFL team doing it? Absolutely. Do I think an NFL team should do it? No. So I've got him at number 3. Number 2, I'll go Aaron Glenn. I put Aaron Glenn at number 2 on this list because, again, I think Aaron Glenn would be a great hire for the New Orleans Saints, but I do think that they're still better off going outside of somebody that they're familiar with. They're familiar with Aaron Glenn, so I got to put him at number 2. And then at number 1, I'll put Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel, right now, of all the coaches that the Saints have been connected to, feels like a guy that's realistic, feels like a guy that is away from the retread conversation, and feels like a guy that can come in and help to rebuild your culture. The biggest thing is, does his kind of strong attitude conflict with Mickey Loomis, Gail Benson, the higher ups with New Orleans, or is that strong attitude actually something that they want in the building? Because if it's something that they want in the building and they're willing to kind of have this collaborative experience or collaborative kind of wavelength with everybody while working with Mike Vrabel, allowing him to come in and be that culture builder is great. He also led the Tennessee Titans while he was their head coach for 6 years, led them to the playoffs 3 times. New Orleans Saints haven't been to the playoffs in 3 years. Feels like something you should be paying attention to. All right, coming up next, let's take a look at the dream scenario candidates for the New Orleans Saints. And I got one more note I want to tell you on Jon Gruden as well. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by friends over at Rocket Money. Rocket Money is something I signed up for a couple of weeks ago. or a few weeks ago now at this point, and they helped me find all of my unwanted, forgotten about subscriptions that I was still paying for. It's embarrassing, but now I'm not paying for them, so it's not embarrassing anymore. So thank you for Rocket Money for making my life that much less embarrassing and saving me that much more money in the process. So if you're somebody that might have those unwanted or forgotten about subscriptions, and if you think you don't, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to be disappointed. I thought I didn't either. I absolutely did. But you're only disappointed for this long. You're elated by the time that it's all said and done, because then you get that money back. So, or not money back, but you're no longer spending that money. They're also great. They have a goals tab, goals function too, that I love, to where they'll help you reach your financial goals, put money aside so you don't have to do the monthly budgeting, all that. So get rid of those unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Head to rocketmoney.com/lockedon to get started today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, family. The New Orleans Saints have some guys that they've already been connected to that we just power ranked. But now let's power rank the dream scenario folks that are out there. Just as a quick reminder, our power rankings when it came to the realistic ones, the guys they've already been connected to, Mike Vrabel at number 1, Aaron Glenn at number 2, Jon Gruden at number 3. The quick note on Jon Gruden is one of the things that Tom Pelissero said in a report Tuesday morning was that he believes, as far as his understanding was that Jon Gruden could have had the Saints offensive coordinator role in 2024 if he wanted it, but he decided that wasn't the route that he wanted to go, went and spent some time in media, and then now we'll go back. So if you're looking for, again, the connective tissue is there when it comes to New Orleans Saints and Jon Gruden. Number 4, I have Mike McCarthy, current Cowboys head coach. Number 5, Darren Rizzi, interim head coach. And then number 6, Colorado Buffalo head coach out of the college ranks, Deion Sanders. I think the college thing too is another reason why I don't look at Deion Sanders as somebody that the Saints might want to roll with. I wouldn't be surprised if they interviewed him just to kind of like hear a little bit about what he has to say, like that report from Jeremy Fowler mentioned. But a collegiate guy coming up from college to be a first-time head coach, I don't know. I don't think that's a fit for New Orleans. All right, now let's take a look at my kind of dream scenario, dream hire for fans, guys that are some of my top guys, stuff like that, when it comes to the power rankings. Now, this isn't me alone telling you like my dream scenario. If I've got time, I'll tell you what my dream scenario is. But this is sort of me like taking a temperature of Saints fans and stuff like that. And honestly, like even some other people that have had some opinions and have shared some opinions with me about this. So a lot taken into account here. So let's go over the rules again. These are folks that cannot be candidates that have been tied to the New Orleans Saints by credible reports. Number 2, I like them. And number 3, you probably like them too. Those are my only rules when it comes to this. So let's start off with number 5, offensive coordinator from the Houston Texans, Bobby Slowick. Now, Bobby Slowick is a guy that I liked a lot for the New Orleans Saints as offensive coordinator when the Saints should have made their offensive coordinator change, which was before the 2023 NFL season. I really liked Bobby Slowick to be a guy that New Orleans could go with. Now, obviously, he followed DeMeco Ryans on his way over to Houston. Both of them were in San Francisco together. It makes perfect sense. The Saints wouldn't have gotten Bobby Slowick in 2023 anyway, because he was going to follow his buddy, which is how this works, right? And good on Bobby Slowick for doing that, because he's found a lot of success. They got him CJ Stroud right away. Pretty cool spot for him. So now he's already into head coaching conversation instead of further offensive coordinator conversation. So my biggest thing, and the reason why I have Bobby Slowick at number 5 is just because I don't know if he's that leader, that rah-rah leader that you kind of need to be as a head coach. You got to be able to inspire. You got to be able to motivate. You got to be able to drive dedication. Can he do that with a commanding voice? Because I think as this team gets progressively younger, the more commanding voices that you have, the better off you're going to be as you start to shed some of those veterans that are in the locker room. Number 4, maybe the best commanding voice on this list, if I'm being entirely honest, Brian Flores. The reason why I have Brian Flores a little bit lower is because I know Saints fans don't necessarily want a defensive head coach. I will tell you this, though. Defensive head coach is not indicative of lack of success. The part that's really hard to argue, though, is that offensive head coaches win Super Bowls. You look at the Super Bowls over the past few years, especially considering the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs have won the majority of them, depending upon how far back you don't go or do go. Typically speaking, it has been offensive head coaches that are winning those championships. So I get it. I understand. So I've got Brian Flores down at number 4. I personally would put him up higher as one of my top candidates, however, because I think, again, if you want a guy that's going to be able to come in and innovate, change, be aggressive, match what you're trying to do and get away from, change what you've been doing, do something entirely different, Brian Flores is the guy that makes sense. Number 3, Kevin Minter. This one is mostly me. I see a couple of Saints fans talking about Kevin Minter, not a lot. I think the big question, and John Hendricks raises this question, which I think has a lot of validity, is how much of the success have you seen around Kevin Minter, actually around Kevin Minter, and how much of it is really about Harbaugh. And I get that. That's what happens when you're under the wing of a Harbaugh, right? But Kevin Minter is somebody that I think can be a really good head coach. He's been around a bunch of different coaching trees. His dad was a coach. He's kind of, he's a younger guy that has really innovative looks on how he deploys his defense and all these other things. But he is a defensive head coach. So I've knocked him down a little bit for that for you, because I know a lot of Saints fans do not want a defensive head coach. So that's why my number 2 and my number 1 are both offensive head coaches. Number 2 for me is offensive coordinator with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Liam Coen. Liam Coen is probably one of my favorite candidates in this head coaching carousel class. He's somebody that is not going to have enough of the big offers to turn around and turn his nose up at the New Orleans Saints. And he's a first-time head coach. And in this scenario, if you look at it, you're either hiring first-time head coaches, or you're hiring guys that have been head coaches and didn't get it done. Look at the list here that we're discussing, right? Brian Flores didn't get it done in Miami. Mike McCarthy hasn't gotten it done in Dallas. You look at Bobby Slowick, Kevin Minter, Liam Coen, Mike Vrabel didn't get it done enough in Tennessee, but did get them to the playoffs 3 times, right? Aaron Glenn, first-time head coach. Liam Coen, first-time head coach. Kevin Minter, first-time head coach, so on and so forth. You get what I'm saying here. So you're either hiring somebody that hasn't been able to get it done at the level that they wanted to get it done as a head coach, or you're hiring somebody that has no head coach resume. And so it just kind of is what it is. But Liam Coen is a guy that I think brings you offensive innovation. You can steal from across your division, make a division opponent a little bit weaker because of that. Maybe a guy like Clint Kubiak would then end up in Tampa. You would know what's going on in terms of what it is that he wants to do there. But for me, you're also looking at, can you develop a quarterback, right? Even if you play 2025 with Derek Carr, you're still looking at developing Spencer Rattler. You're still looking at developing Jake Haener. You're still looking at potentially drafting another quarterback in future years, 2026 or beyond. And you're looking at, can you develop that talent? Liam Coen has done wonders with Baker Mayfield. That got Dave Canales a job last year. Dave Canales did wonders with Baker Mayfield and then got a head coaching job across the division in Carolina. Liam Coen has done wonders with Baker Mayfield this year, could get him a head coaching job across the division in New Orleans. He doesn't check the box, though, he kind of checks the Mickey Loomis, he knows him box. Liam Coen was somebody that New Orleans really liked before they went to Pete Carmichael as their offensive coordinator. So there is a little bit of the he knows him check mark when it comes to Liam Coen there too. So I will point that out. And then finally, number 1 is Ben Johnson, right? And Ben Johnson's the one guy, the one head coaching candidate I can see out there that turns his nose up at the New Orleans Saints. Everybody else, they ain't going to be as desired as a Ben Johnson. They're not going to have as many opportunities to say no to one of only 32 jobs available in the world. They're not going to turn an interview away, but Ben Johnson might, because Ben Johnson apparently is only interested in interviewing at places that he absolutely wants to be in, right? That he seriously wants to consider. But everything is pointing towards him going to Chicago, right? Caleb Williams, young pieces on offense. He would be able to get a little bit of the symmetry and alignment that he wants between ownership, general management, front office, himself, all that. He could get that here in New Orleans too, but he doesn't get the young quarterback that's the number 1 overall pick and all this other stuff. He would get Spencer Rattler. He would get Derek Carr. He would get a veteran quarterback that he could utilize for a year, or maybe not come in and say, I want Hendon Hooker from over in Detroit, whatever. But he doesn't get the number 1 overall pick and one of the highest, lauded draft picks and all these other things. It's just a different ballgame. It's just a different ballgame. So we'll see. But obviously, Ben Johnson should be number 1 on everybody's dream scenario list when it comes to this. So we'll keep this updated here as we continue on throughout the next few weeks. Coming up next, the Atlanta Falcons and the Atlanta Falcons fans are Saints fans this weekend. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Get it, Who Dat Nation? Ha 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 ha. What a poetic end to the 2024 NFL season. The New Orleans Saints will finish at best third in the division. And despite that, they still have and play a role in who ends up at the top of the NFC South division. And my favorite part of all of it is the fact that this weekend, Atlanta Falcons fans have to be New Orleans Saints fans as well. The bitterest of rivalries all of a sudden dissolves when your fate hangs in the balance, Atlanta. In order for Atlanta to get into the playoffs, they need to win against the Carolina Panthers. Shouldn't be a tall task there, especially after how good we saw Michael Penix operate on that Sunday night game and all that. But they can't just win. And they're in. They need to win, and they need the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to lose on Sunday. And this game, both these games will be played at the same time, so expect some scoreboard watching for the Atlanta Falcons. But the Atlanta Falcons fans literally need help from the New Orleans Saints. And I'm just going to tell you, two things. I'm going to describe two scenarios. I'm going to describe to you the most likely scenario, which is that the New Orleans Saints travel to Tampa Bay, and then Tampa Bay wins in a comfortable margin up against New Orleans, and then goes on to be the top of the NFC South. And then we get the same division finish that we projected before the season, which was Tampa at number 1, Atlanta at number 2, New Orleans at number 3, and then Carolina at number 4. And hopefully, in that same scenario, Atlanta also wins comfortably so that they get a nice little win at the end, but then get nothing for it. But then here's the other scenario. The other scenario is that the New Orleans Saints go in to Tampa and they play lights out. Their version of lights out, right? I would say that what the New Orleans Saints version of lights out is versus the Green Bay Packers or the Minnesota Vikings or the Detroit Lions version of lights out are, there's a big disparity there, right? And so in any case though, New Orleans goes out there, they play lights out. It comes all the way down to a last second field goal, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers knock it through, walk away winners. The Saints walk away feeling great about themselves and could potentially improve just a little bit when it comes to their draft pick. Not a lot. They can move like 1 or 2 spots, which in this draft doesn't really make a difference. Doesn't matter if you're picking 8 or 10. You're getting the same pool of players, but it would improve. It would put the Saints in position to potentially improve their draft stock, and then keep the Atlanta Falcons out, and hopefully is a quick game to where Atlanta gets the win, and then they're there and they're watching Tampa Bay just kick a field goal through for the win at the end. I think that's probably best case scenario for a lot of Saints fans on social media. They'll have a lot of fun with that and everything like that. But it is just a poetic end to the New Orleans Saints 2024 season, that a win at the end of the season, right? Something that should make you feel really good. A win at the end of the season would be looked at by fans as a failure. It'd be looked at by fans as a failure because people would be worried about draft position, which again, win or lose, draft position is not going to change enough for you to really care about, but people are going to care about it. And then a win also would get the Atlanta Falcons in, assuming that the Falcons beat the Carolina Panthers. And so the New Orleans Saints have worked themselves into a situation to where even if they win at the end of the season, their fans might not be happy about it. It's poetic. It's poetic. And Falcons fans would probably be happier about the Saints winning than New Orleans Saints fans. And the poetry is just so wild. But in any case, the New Orleans Saints are now the Atlanta Falcons fans' favorite team. And that's a lot of fun to say. So ha to all that. All right, let's take a look at truly, though, what this game this weekend could look like, because we got some injury updates from Darren Rizzi that could potentially change this game and actually make it to where New Orleans could be very competitive in this one. 3 players potentially still looking to get their way back out onto the field. If I were to give you a guess right now, which could change by the time that we get to practice tomorrow, but if I were to give you a guess right now, I would say that one of these guys is more likely to play than the other 2 by a long shot. So 3 players still trying to make their way back for the New Orleans Saints, which, by the way, is a good sign. Like, the Saints have nothing to play for late in the season. It's a pride thing. It's a brotherhood thing. These guys want to be out there to play alongside their teammates. They want to be on the football field. That's a good sign in terms of buy-in and stuff like that. So call it what you want. It's a good sign. Derek Carr could potentially still be back. They ran a simulation with him last week early. Obviously, it didn't work out. And so what they're trying to do is, can he take snaps? Can he protect himself falling to the ground? Can he use that hand to stabilize? Can all these other things. Didn't do that very well last week, so it didn't end, or that didn't go very well. Didn't go as well as hoped last week, so he ended up not being on the field. And so this week, they're going to do it again early this week, so probably today or before practice on Wednesday, and in which case we'll get an idea of how things worked out if number 4 is back on the field at practice on Wednesday. So we'll be there and we'll be able to keep you up to date on that. Number 2, Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara wants to play is what Darren Rizzi told us on Monday. So he's still working to get his way back out on the field as well. He has no interest in finishing that season on the sideline, wants to be out there on the field. Darren Rizzi said that Alvin Kamara was his first phone call after the loss to the Las Vegas Raiders. So pretty cool stuff there. But basically, when it comes to him, they're just he's been in there rehabbing 3 or 4 times a day, Darren Rizzi said. So they're just trying to make sure that he can get back and check all the boxes that the medical staff is looking for. And then finally, Chris Olave. He said Chris Olave's been like, hey, man, I want to get back out there. I want to get back out there. I want to get back out there. And let's just be very clear. Chris Olave has no reason other than his own desire to want to get back out on the football field this season, right? Scary concussions early on this year, scary situation, was away from the team for a little while, visiting with specialists and doing all that, has been back with the team, back on the practice field, was full all through last week, had a really strong end to the week, according to Darren Rizzi, and could potentially be back out there this week. And again, I think he's a long shot. I think Carr's a long shot. I think Alvin Kamara is less of a long shot. So Alvin Kamara is the one that I would say is more likely out of those 3 to be out there, but still not a surefire thing by any stretch of the imagination. But the Saints could potentially go into Tampa with Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, and Chris Olave on Sunday, which would be absolutely wild. I don't think that will be the case, but we'll see. A couple of other injury updates for you. Kendre Miller in concussion protocol. We'll get a better idea tomorrow when we get to practice about how quickly he's moved. Jalen Ford, rookie linebacker, is done for the season. Lower leg injury. It is surgical, fractured fibula, so we'll need some surgery to repair that. There's also they're also waiting on some information back about potential ligament damage, which would just kind of change what the timeline is for his return. Peyton Turner, they'll know more, but he's dealing with an ankle injury. And then Marquez Valdez-Scantling checked out fine on Monday, according to interim head coach Darren Rizzi. And we'll see exactly what happens there, but sounds like everything's okay there. He took a big hit over the middle of the field. And then one last update. Taysom Hill, who of course is not going to be back at all this season, but just so you know, surgery apparently went well. Darren Rizzi said he was given all double thumbs up when it comes to the surgery. And also said, quote, he's had a great attitude about playing again. So it sounds like it's still very much in the cards for Taysom Hill, and certainly his intent to return to the football field. We'll see if that ends up being the case, how long it takes, and what that means for his contract going into next season by the time that it's all said and done. All right. Thank you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Make sure you go and check out, and that'll be with all of our practice updates or getting ready for practice, all that other stuff, and then taking a look at any other big news that might come across the timeline. Make sure you check out Locked On NFL for your second listen today. Go and check me out as I'm subbing in over at Peacock and Williamson this week, our Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Matt Williamson, former NFL scout, and I breaking down some of the NFL's biggest stories. You can go and check that out as well. We appreciate you very much for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how your mom and them. Yikes.